So I am a cookery teacher. I do lots of fermentation teaching. I also work in a school teaching food education. I also work as a recipe writer, recipe developer, and a food stylist as well. But today I'm going to be talking to you about some edible festive gifts. So every year at Christmas, I really enjoy kind of getting in the kitchen and making a few things to eat for us, but also to gift to friends. I find it's a nice thing to kind of have just around if you're going out to see people, which I know our movements this year are a bit more restricted, so we're probably not seeing as many people, but just little things to give to people to say, happy Christmas, happy festive period, and just to have, spread some of the Christmas or holiday joy. So two of the things that we're doing today are, well, three of the things. We're doing three things today. So they're all really simple things that you can do with your children or on your own if you need a bit of you time. They're all really simple, and they're also designed to be quite economical. So things that you can create on any budget and adapt based on kind of what you have in as well. So today we're going to be making some savory cheese and sesame biscuits. So these biscuits can be made with a strong cheddar, a mild cheddar, or you can do, today I'm going to do a mix actually of blue cheese and cheddar because we're a big sort of blue cheese fan in our house. So they are made with wholemeal flour, so we're adding in some more nutrients and fiber using our wholemeal flour, and it gives them a nice kind of nutty flavour as well, and slightly heartier too. So we're going to be making some cheese biscuits. And these are great because you can make them up in a big batch. Today I'm actually going to make a double batch, and then I'm going to store some in an airtight container, and hopefully they will last until next week or the week after. And with these as well, you can kind of change and add the spicing. So today I'm going to add some smoked paprika, but you can just use just plain, you don't have to add anything, or you can use things like a bit of chili, a bit of mustard powder, just to add a bit of flavour and a bit more kick. And then also we're going to be making a herb infused honey. Now, herb infused honey is something that sounds and looks really amazing, but it is really, really, really simple. So this essentially, we're just going to heat some honey to a nice sort of warm temperature just before it starts to boil. We're going to add in some sprigs of fresh herbs, and then we're going to let that sit, and the flavour is going to infuse. And then we're going to rebottle or re-jars in some nice little jars. And in terms of jars, I buy lots of my food in jars, so I keep those jars. So it's a really great way, a really great habit to get into. Anytime you buy something in a jar, give it a good wash, get the label off if you want, and keep those jars because they make really nice things for storing, but also if you want to give something out again, you've got a nice clean jar for doing that. So I'm going to use some recycled jars and just a few sprigs of herbs to make a nice little herb infused honey gift. And also with these kinds of things as well, I think it's quite fun getting the kids to make gift tags, which you can do with a bit of paper or a bit of card, or you can buy the little kind of pre-cut gift tags as well, so they can get involved with the decorating and kind of put in their own stamp on the present. And also then we're going to finally make some chocolate snacks. So these again are quite easy. All it requires is some chocolate. I mean, you can use milk, dark, white. Today I'm going to use a mix of dark and white just to have a bit of fun, and essentially just decorating those with whatever you've got. So today I've got some chopped pistachios and some cranberries to make them look a bit of red and green festive, but you could use anything from raisins to currants to sultanas, chopped up apricots, any kind of nut or seed to kind of decorate them and make them look nice. And these are quite fun for the kids to do, and I'll show you later if you want to kind of make sure they're kind of a bit more even sized, and get the kids involved with maybe a bit of drawing as well. I'll show you how you can do that as well. All right, so that's what we're going to make today. So first up, I'm going to start with my cheese biscuits because these are going to need to sit for a bit in the fridge and firm up. But if at any time you've got any questions, if you're cooking along with me, just take yourself off mute and ask the question. But otherwise, I'll busy myself away and chat. But yeah, anytime you need to add something in, question, just chime in. All right, so first up, we're going to get our scales out and we're going to weigh out our flour. I've already done that, but you're going to need 150 grams of flour. As I said, I'm making a double batch. This looks slightly larger than what you will see in your bowl. And always a good practice to kind of, if you can have the time to cook, if you've got the time to make one batch, always make a double batch because, it kind of kills two birds with one stone. So you have some extra to go around as well. And obviously, if you're making biscuits for a fair few people, you probably want to make a double batch. Okay. So whole grain flour in there. So I've got whole grain spelt flour, but you can use whole grain wheat. You could use rye. There's a number of other flours that you could use, but I'm using whole grain flour. for the nutritional benefits, and also just the flavour, because the flavour is much more, as I said, much more interesting, a bit more nutty with the whole grain flour. All right, and I'm also going to have some baking powder. So to my flour, I'm going to add, a teaspoon of baking powder. So again, as I said, I'm doing a double batch, so I'm doing 2 teaspoons. Okay. All right. And also to that, I'm going to add my smoked paprika. So again, as I said, you could use regular paprika, you could use mustard powder, you could use nothing at all. You could use a bit of chili if you wanted to make them a bit spicy. Again, depending on who you're gifting these to, or if you're gifting them to yourself, make them however you like. All right, that's my smoked paprika in. All right, okay. And then I'm going to get grating my cheese. So I'm going to need 110 grams of cheese. As I said, I'm going to do a mixture of blue and mild, mature cheddar, just to see, because we like blue cheese quite a lot, but I don't want it to be too overpowering with the paprika. So I'm going to do a mix. Okay, so I'm going to grate my cheese. Let's weigh it up first. Okay, so 110 grams of this going in. And also, this is something maybe to do. I know if you buy lots of cheese at Christmas, I know we often get caught up in like cheese at Christmas. So if you've got any cheese left over and you're kind of maybe sick of eating cheese, or you kind of just want to be done with it in one fell swoop, this is a good way to get rid of some of the cheese board cheese if you've got a lot knocking around after Christmas. All right. Okay, so I'm just going to grate my cheese. And again, this is something that children really love doing. So when you get them involved and you want them to help with this, get them doing some of the grating. And obviously the big holes mean it's easier to, get through the block of cheese. With the softer cheese, like the blue cheese here, I'm just going to crumble that with my fingers. I'm not going to grate that. All right. Okay. And someone asked me once, could you make these without cheese? You probably could, but it's a slightly different recipe. You'd want something to bind them together, so you'd need something else to bind them, because obviously the cheese adds flavour, but it also binds them. I saw there was a question in, and so either Martha, could you give me the question so I can see what they're asking?
Sure. Yasko is asking, if you wanted to give these to children, what would be a good spice to use?
Well, I've got some sweet smoked paprika, so that's not going to have any heat in it. And you're only adding a little hint of it. So paprika's fine, or nothing. You can just do nothing at all. Or again, if they like mustard, you could do a bit of mustard powder, but it's not going to have, it's just add a little undertone of flavor. So it won't be sort of too overpowering. So, I mean, as they are, I mean, I made these with, because I do, guys, those of you who know, I do a fair bit of fermenting. So I actually dry up, I dehydrate kimchi powder, and I use kimchi powder in mine. And obviously the flavor and the bit of the kick is there, but it wasn't still too spicy for the kids. So, you can add, paprika. I mean, obviously, probably don't go for the hot one, because there is one that has lots of chilies on the box that will probably be a bit too spicy. But yeah, anything. I mean, again, it also depends on your children's palates. Like if they're kind of really like not put, they're really put off by any kind of flavoring, you might just want to steer clear, or you might just want to go for a little bit and see how they go. I always kind of, if I'm not sure how they're going to take something, I always put a little bit in to hope that maybe their palate will start to recognize it. And then the next time I make it, I kind of do the full amount. So you could take that approach. But nothing too spicy, I would say. Okay. Very good question. So now I'm going to do my butter. So I'm also going to grate my butter. So again, this can be a little bit messy. But again, another fun way for children to kind of get involved with the kind of butter and kind of crumbing in process, because we're going to need to crumb in our butter. And I find if you grate it, you've already got it in sort of a nice thin shape to get you to incorporate it easily. So we're going to grate it. So again, butter. So it's 110 grams of butter. So a pretty easy recipe to remember. So 150 grams of flour, 110 grams of butter, 110 grams of cheese, and then yeah, and then a teaspoon of baking powder and a teaspoon of whatever spice you're using if you plan to use it. All right, so my butter, I'm going to just grate and pop back into this. Just doing it on my chopping board, and I'll pop it back into the bowl. All right, so you're grating your butter. It can get a little bit messy towards the end, but that's all right. But you know, when you're crumbing butter and it's quite hard, and you've got kind of those big chunks, it can take a bit more working to kind of get it into the flour. And I think with kids as well, it can be, yeah, it can be a bit of a laborious task. So I find grating it gets it done easier. And obviously you're going to cool it back down. So if their hands, little hot hands, make it a bit too warm, that's okay. You're going to cool them back down. So we're going to rest the dough in the fridge. Or you could even do it in the freezer for a bit if you want to cut down the resting time. Because I know sometimes with children as well, you know, when they're cooking, they really don't like waiting for things to be done. So another way of just kind of getting it cooled down quicker is just to pop it in the freezer, and that kind of halves the kind of resting time. But obviously don't forget it, and it'll freeze. All right. I'm just grating my last bits of butter. Okay. All right. So first, I'm going to crumb my butter through my flour. So I've got my bowl of flour here. I'm going to add my butter in. It looks like cheese. So I'm sure the kids will also get a kick out of seeing the butter looking a bit like cheese, which is kind of fun. And then obviously using my fingertips to just kind of work it into the flour. So this, if you're doing this, you want to do this quickly, kind of trying to minimize the touch. So you don't want to melt the butter too much. You can get in there with 2 hands as well. Okay, but again, it doesn't really matter too much because it's, you know, it's a bit of fun. All right, so I'm just crumbing this in, and then we're going to do the same thing with our cheese as well. So we need to kind of knead the cheese into it when we are done with the butter. Does anybody have any other questions now while I'm doing this? So this will take a few minutes to get in here. You could also add herbs if you wanted. So things like thyme. So obviously if you're doing infused honey as well, you're buying a pack of thyme, or if you've got some growing in a garden. Rosemary obviously is a quite wintry herb, and you'll see it actually quite a lot kind of outgrowing in people's gardens and in parks and places. So if you can pick it, or if you want to ask someone to pick some, that's a great way of getting some free rosemary. And anytime people on my street, my neighbors and things, any person who's got rosemary growing in their garden, they're often giving it away because it grows so quickly. So you can get some for free either by foraging it, obviously with permission, or getting it off someone who's got a spare bush. And sometimes if I see something that I find interesting in someone's front patch, sometimes I'll knock and say, would you mind if I had a bit of rosemary or whatever else, which people don't mind often, as long as you're asking. All right, okay. So my butter's crumbed in. So you want it to look a bit like breadcrumbs. I don't know if you can see that, but it'll look the consistency of breadcrumbs, okay? And now I'm gonna add in my cheese. And again, this is just massaging it in. And what we want to do then is to create some little logs. So the final result here, massaging in the cheese, will be some nice sort of formed logs. Okay, just getting that in. Okay, so again, this is a very sort of tactile recipe. So if your kids really like getting their hands in and getting stuck in, I know some kids find it a bit difficult taking that first plunge to get their hands in and kind of getting a bit messy. But I think that's part of the fun. And I think often we can kind of, and I know I'm guilty of this, kind of be like, oh, you're getting so messy. We kind of put them off making mess. But I think in the kitchen, it's a bit of fun. And we, you know, we have to, yeah, let them make a little bit of mess. But yeah, so I think they often get a bit nervous about getting their hands messy. But in the end, this is going to lead to something nice. So it's okay. All right, so I'm getting my cheese in. I'll pull this a bit closer to me. All right, so it is just a matter of kind of massaging it and kind of kneading it like you would a dough to get all of the flour in together. Okay. All right. Okay. Now I'm just going to start pressing it together, form some nice balls that I'm going to then put into sort of oblong cylinder like logs. And then what I'm going to do with those logs is I'm going to coat them in some sesame seeds so that I can then roll them in those sesame seeds and then let them chill. So that'll be the next. All right, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap them, and you can wrap them and cling to them if you want, but I'm going to use a bit of parchment or baking paper, or if you use the kind of beeswax racks or things like that, you can use that as well. Okay. Just going to knead this around in the bowl to get out the last bits. Okay. I'm going to roll it around on my board as well to pick up any last bits of cheese. Okay. So as I said, I've made a double batch here, so I'm going to have 4 small logs rather than 2. Okay. Let's split this one. Okay. Massaging that so it all will stick together. Obviously, the heat of your hands will help melt the butter and relax the cheese, because if your cheese has been in the fridge, it'll be quite cold. Okay. I'm just forming this into nice loaves. And then these will be sort of your slice and bake once that's done. So once I get these in the oven, sorry, in the fridge to sit, and I'll get my oven going. Okay. And I might put these in the freezer to kind of speed up the process. Okay. All right. Okay. Right, so here are my logs. So I'm going to get my baking paper. All right. And I've got some sesame seeds. And I just used what I had in a cupboard. So I happen to have a mix of black and white. If you've just got white, that's fine. If you've got any other seeds, that's fine. Or if you don't want to cook them in seeds, you don't have to. But I find they look nice when they bake. So what I do is I'm just going to roll the log in the seeds. Okay. Okay. And then I kind of roll it up. And then I twist the end, so it looks a bit like giant sweeties. All right, so that's one. All right. Ooh, knocking my decorations there. All right. Okay. Should make this a bit smaller. Okay. All right, I'm gonna do my next one now. Okay, I'm gonna get this into. So you want them to look like sort of sausagey type things. Yeah. I mean, you could do them slightly bigger as well. It's up to you. Okay. I'm just rolling them in the seeds. Okay. Folding that over and then tucking in the edges. Okay. All right, so I'm going to do the last one. So I need to grab some more baking paper. Ah, sorry, it's up there. The last 2 now. All right, some more seeds. Okay. And then I'm going to pop these in the fridge. All right, any questions about that so far? Any questions? No? All right, so we're going to leave these in the fridge. They need probably about half an hour to 45 minutes in the fridge. But as I said, if you're going to put them in the freezer to kind of speed up the process, they'll need about 10-15 minutes. And the reason we're doing that is obviously because we've worked the cheese and the butter, so it's gone soft. And so we just want to prime it back up so that we can slice through it. I'm going to pop mine in the freezer. So sorry, I've disappeared out of shot for a second while I get into my freezer. All right. Popping these guys in the freezer. And I will set myself a timer so I don't forget and I don't freeze them. So you might want to do that too. Okay. All right, I'm just going to have a quick tidy up because there's sesame seeds everywhere. I see there's a question that's popped up. Question.
Yeah, sure. I'll just read through that for you. Can you store them in the freezer to be baked at a later date?
I haven't done that, but you probably could. But what I would probably do is if you want to store them for baking it later, I would slice them first and put them on something flat. Because otherwise you're waiting for the whole log to kind of defrost. So then you can slice it. And I think the kind of, yeah, the changing of the temperature might impact on the structure. So I would slice them first. And if you've got to lay them on something flat, or put them in a little Tupperware box where you kind of put in some parchment paper and kind of lay them out in layers. So that way you can just pop them straight on the baking sheet and bake them from frozen. So I would pre-cut them if you wanted to do that. So the logs, I mean, I haven't tried the logs. I mean, it might be okay, but I know sometimes when you freeze things like cheese, it doesn't quite have the same integrity when it's defrosted. It kind of goes a bit crumblier. I don't know if you've ever frozen cheese before, but that's been my experience. So it's slightly crumblier, and I guess because that's the water content that's in the milk that goes into the cheese, it just makes it, yeah, it doesn't have the same sort of structural integrity versus being frozen. So I would freeze them and then bake them. And then you could obviously bake them just from frozen, and they probably need a minute or two longer to go. All right, so while that is settling, we're going to do our honey. Okay, so with the honey, you can use anything you've got. So obviously you can get honey very economically these days. Some of the shops like Aldi, you can get a nice big bottle for, you know, $1.50, somewhere around there. But also I found recently buying these things in bulk. So if you know you maybe want to make this for a few presents, you could buy a big bulk jar. So not far from me in Peckham, there's a couple of sort of cash and carry type shops. We have, you know, a range of everything. I saw the other day, you know, like I think it was like 3 or 4 litre tub of honey for about 6 or 7 quid. So, you know, if you wanted to do that, you can make loads of presents out of that, and it's always going to cost you the cost of the honey, a few herbs, and obviously you're using recycled jars. So that would be amazing. So, but I've got just my supermarket honey. So as I said, with this, you can measure it out, you can be precise if you want, but there's really no need to. You just want to work out how much of it you want to make, how many jars you might have to fill. So I'm going to do about 600 mils. So I've got 2 jars. And what I want to do is I just want to heat this, as I said, to just before it starts to boil. Okay. So I'm just going to add my honey straight into my pan. Don't know if you can see this. I'll move all this out of the way. And typically I've got a pan that doesn't, it's not an induction pan. Perfect. Now that I put all this honey in, that's annoying. So I'll do it on my hob behind me here. Okay, I'm just draining that in. And again, this can be fun. I mean, obviously with the kids watching all the honey go in the pot and talking about letting them choose kind of what herbs go in. You could even do things like orange zest or lemon zest, garlic even. Garlic and honey actually make a really nice combination. So you could whack a few garlic cloves in. Again, so things like bay leaves. These are things that you, if you've got access a bay tree, anyone got one in their front garden, or you see one out and about, you could take a few leaves. Yeah, so it's the sort of stuff that, you know, you really can kind of choose what you want. Even things like lavender. So lavender is obviously one of the herbs we see growing out on people's front paths and in gardens quite a lot. And it is obviously one that is quite bountiful. But yes, if you know anybody with some lavender, you can use a bit of lavender. And lavender honey is quite nice. Okay, so I'm going to add a tiny bit more because my honey was already open. So just getting this in, and I want to heat it just before it boils. Okay, and then I'm going to let that infuse. So infusing is kind of Not boiling it through, just kind of letting it sit in and letting the flavor kind of slowly seep into whatever you're infusing as it cools down. So here I've got some rosemary and thyme. These are both from the supermarket. One cost me 69p and the other was 99p. And you're going to need about, for 600 ml, I'm going to say about 6 sprigs. And then you'll also want a couple to go inside the jar. So I'm going to show you quickly what my jars look like. Where did I put those? I have a whole box of things and I don't know where I put them. Give me just a sec. Where did I put my box of things? Give me 1 second. I've got to find that. It's a whole box of like jars and ribbons. No idea where I put it. Ah, there it is. It's on my bottom shelf of my trolley. There we go. Okay, so yes, so I've just got some old jars like this. So this is actually an old honey jar. And I've got some baby food jars. So a friend of mine over the road, she saves these jars from her babies' dinners and gives them to me. And they actually work perfectly for this sort of thing. They're a nice sort of long shape, a nice sort of airtight lid. So if you've got anyone with a baby who has baby food jars, those work beautifully. So yes, so I've got my jars here. So I'm going to put in a few sprigs of thyme in one. Okay. And I might actually do a mix of herbs. I might do some rosemary and some thyme. I tend to like the flavor of thyme better than I do rosemary. So I'm maybe going to go more with thyme and less rosemary. So just a little sprig in like that, just to kind of add some interest and a bit of specialness to the jar. Okay. And I'm going to add a tiny sprig of rosemary. So I'm just chopping off the bottoms in because my jars are quite wee. So you want to make sure that it's going to fit in the jar and be covered by the honey. So honey is actually one of these things that it is amazing because it preserves things. So it'll preserve those herbs in a very sort of, fresh state. Apparently they found honey in sort of the tombs in ancient Egypt that had been around for years and years and years, that was still edible. So it's an amazing kind of preserving agent. It doesn't seem to go off. So this makes it a nice gift to give. So even if they're not going to use it straight away, they'll have it for some time after. All right, so I'm going to put that thyme and things in there. And then I'm going to see how my honey's going. So it's just heating. So obviously when the honey heats, it'll start to go a bit more liquidy, and that's fine. That's what you would expect. Okay, and then I'm going to get a few sprigs. So I'm going to get, say, 6 sprigs of thyme and maybe 2 of rosemary. As I said, I like thyme better than I do rosemary. And you could also, as I said, use rose petals even. So if you've got some edible rose petals, that would be nice. But whatever you've got in, herbs, garlic, zest. Okay, I'm just going to let that heat up. All right, I'm going to pop that next to the pan so I know when to do that. Does anybody have any questions about that? This is going to not take very long to make. Any questions about that? No? Okay, so I'm going to show you as well. So gift tags. So these are little gift tags I buy, but you can very easily make these. So if you get a bit of cardboard, so I know everybody's kind of getting deliveries, and often deliveries come a box in a box. So if you've got a bit of card and just roughly cut something that shape and just poke a little hole in, get the kids to draw, we're making honey. You could draw a honeybee on there. I mean, my honeybees will look quite atrocious because I'm not a drawer, but you could do a little honeybee on there with some stripes and some wings and some little antenna, and then here we go, there's a honeybee. My best attempt. And then you can make a little gift tag. So obviously I know this year lots of teachers' gifts are they're not asking children not to bring in gifts for teachers, but if you are still able to kind of give your teachers gifts, something like this would be nice and easy to do, and get them to write a little message on the back, or also for grandparents or for neighbors or anybody that you want to just kind of say happy Christmas to. Okay, I'm drawing a little stinger on my bee as well. Not known for my drawing skills, guys. And I've also got a few bits of ribbon. Again, this is the sort of stuff that I collect when I just see bits of ribbon and things. I just buy it just because I know birthday presents and whatever else. But you can buy, you could even use thread. So if you've got sort of a sewing kit and you don't, want to buy extra ribbon, you could just use a bit of thread as well, just to attach the label. All right. So I'm going to, and this again is a fun activity. I have the kids actually doing this weekend for something else, and they actually really enjoyed. And also, if you've got any sort of stamps are fun. They can stamp the labels, putting stamps on, or just taking some pens and drawing some pictures is fine too. All right. Okay, I'm just going to tie that on in a little knot. Cut it a wee bit too short, but it should be okay. Okay, so we've got a little label on that. All right, let's make one for the other one. Maybe draw a tree on this one because my honeybee looks pretty bad. So I'll do a quick Christmas tree. I mean, no promises about the Christmas tree either. Oh yeah, no, that doesn't look like a Christmas tree. That's okay. We'll pretend a child drew it. All right. And these sorts of things, like you can buy, big things of big. I mean, I think people are kind of getting into the idea of kind of just making things a bit less, plasticky and shiny. So, buying some brown paper, just a roll of brown paper that you can get at places like Smith's, the kind of postal paper, and then letting the kids decorate that, whether it be just with some stamps or just, things they've drawn. It just, getting a bit of ribbon. It doesn't need to be, packaged in lots of glitter and sparkly stuff and whatever else. Okay, so my honey is starting to, I see lots of bubbles kind of around the side and on the bottom. So I know that it's probably going to boil soon. So I'm just going to keep an eye. All right, yeah, it's starting to bubble around the edges. All right, so I'm just keep an eye on it because I don't want it to start caramelizing, right? Because then it'll go too sticky. Okay. All right, so I'm going to turn that off now. And I'm going to pop my herbs in. And I'm just going to give that a stir. Okay, so we want that flavor to infuse in there. All right. Oh, I can already smell it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cover it with a bit of cling film, or you can use a tea towel. But essentially that just traps in the steam and helps the flavor to kind of really go into the honey. Okay, so I just want to leave that now until it cools. Okay. And then obviously when it cools, I want to then pour it into my jars. So pouring it into the jars, I mean, if you're getting the kids to do this, you may want to transfer it into a jug, or use a funnel if you've got a funnel, or even make yourself a funnel out of a bit of baking paper. You're kind of twisting it over to make a little funnel so that you don't get it everywhere. And maybe you probably as well might want to save the labeling until you put it in the jars, because you might need to give your jars a wipe down if there's any spills. Okay. All right, so I'm going to tuck this away. We'll come back to that in a second. All right, and so now, and I'll move these guys out of the way. So I'll show you those. I'll show you them again when we're done. Okay, so now we're going to work on our festive chocolate snacks. So again, these are something that you can make quite easily, quite quickly. Obviously, chocolate does vary in prices and qualities, so just buy the best chocolate you can afford. The Baker's chocolate actually works. Sometimes I find you can get those really big bars of Baker's chocolate, like at Aldi, for like £1.20, and they taste just as good. They work just as good, because obviously you're not just eating the chocolate on its own. You're going to be adding some other flavor to it. So if the base of the chocolate is pretty basic, pretty plain, that's actually quite good, because we are going to be adding some extra flavor. So to make it a bit more Christmassy, a bit more festive, I'm going to add some orange zest and also a bit of nutmeg. But again, those are just added extras to kind of make it a bit more festive, but you can leave those out. You could also substitute a bit of cinnamon for the nutmeg if you wanted, or a bit of mixed spice. These are kinds of things as well that I find I buy, and they kind of stay in my cupboard for years. If you probably bought nutmeg once, you probably will have nutmeg for a few years to come. So, all right, so here I've got 100 grams of dark chocolate. So I've got 70% dark. and I've got some white chocolate. And what I'm going to do is when I'm making my snaps, I'm going to mix them not together, but kind of put a bit of white, bit of dark, and make them kind of, you know, a mottled kind of swirl, a swirl effect. So that's fun. You don't have to do that. You can just use dark, or you could even use all white if you wanted. Okay, so I'm going to pop this out of the way. With the chocolate to melt it, you can either use what's called a bain-marie, which is just a fancy French name for water bath. Let me make sure this is going to work. Okay. Yes. So you want to make a water bath. So in making a water bath, all you need to do, and the reason we do this with chocolate is because you don't want to put too much direct heat on the chocolate because it burns, and burnt chocolate does not taste or smell very nice. And obviously you've wasted precious chocolate. So you want to always heat chocolate with a bit of indirect heat. And also if you're melting chocolate with children, it's a safer way to do it is with heated water than in a microwave or something else. So sometimes when I'm doing it with children, what I'll do is I'll chop the chocolate up really, really small. And that's also the key to kind of getting it to melt quicker, is just smaller pieces of chocolate. So chopping it up or breaking it up really small helps it to melt quicker. And also stirring as well. So if it's got a source of heat from underneath, kind of heating it up, stirring it will help it to melt quicker as well. Okay, so sometimes if I don't want to do this with it on the heat with the kids, what I will do is just kind of get my pot of water quite hot. I'll cover it with a bit of a tea towel, which I'll show you how to do once it's off. And then what I'll do is I'll just put the bowl on top and then kind of supervise them stirring. Or I've also done it where I put a bowl in a bowl. So if you've got two bowls, unfortunately I've used my two bowls for my chocolate, but you can set a bowl in a bowl and obviously put hot water in the one underneath and put the chocolate on top and stir that way. Obviously the bowl will still get a bit hot, so often I put a tea towel around to protect it. But obviously this is something that obviously you would be supervising anyway. So just work out what works and is safest for you and your child depending on their age. Or it might be that you do this on your own, just get the chocolate melted and let them come in for the decoration. So there's often things when I talk to parents about cooking with children, they kind of think the children have to be involved in every step. They very much don't. I think sometimes it's best for your sanity, but also for the sake of getting some of the prep out of the way, the stuff that they will get a bit bored by, is to kind of prep some bits and get some bits done and then bring them in and let them finish it off. So it could be that you melt the chocolate and then call them in to do the kind of dotting and decorating. Okay, and then if the chocolate does start to get a bit firm and too firm to kind of pour, then all you need to do is just put it over the warm water again and stir it a bit and it will melt. Okay, so I'm just breaking my chocolate up into slightly smaller pieces. Okay. Okay. All right. I'm going to move this over so it's a bit more central. Okay. And you also want to make sure you've got a bowl that fits into your pan if you're using a bain-marie. And you want to put just enough water in the pan to not touch the bowl. You don't want the bowl sitting in the water. You want it hovering above. So mine is just about the right height. You don't want to put it in the water to start boiling it, because again, you don't want to put too much heat on the chocolate. So you want probably, a few centimeters of water in the pan and the bowl kind of hovering above the layer of water. So the steam that's creating will start to melt the chocolate. All right. And again, this is something fun that kids often like watching. They like to see things happening. So watching it go from solid to liquid is always fun. So while that's melting, I'm going to show you how. You can do this or you don't have to do this. So you might not be able to see this, but I'll show you. So I'm going to use the wide flat one for this. So what I've done here on some parchment, I don't know if you can see this, I've drawn some circles. Okay, and I've just done that with the bottom of a cup. You can get them to do that, to draw the circles, the size that you want to make the snaps, or you can just free pour it. But again, if you're looking for activity, something to keep them entertained, you can give them a little cup and a little pencil and let them draw the circles. And then it's just then getting them to aim in the circle when they're making the snaps. I think there was a question. What was the question?
I don't think it was quite a question. I think Melissa was saying good morning to us all and saying,
oh,
Glad I had the
Morning.
chocolate melting, right? I
Yeah,
think she
yeah.
might be cooking along with us.
Ah,
Morning.
okay. Yeah. Melting your chocolate. Yes. Yes. So if you're doing it by microwave, which you can also do, and occasionally I do, I just give it a few seconds, stop it, stir it, put it back on. So never leaving it in for more than like 20, 30 seconds in one go. And always stirring it to make sure, because obviously I think microwaves most often kind of heat from down below. So if you carry on letting it cook without stirring, the bottom will burn. So in the microwave, if you can do it, actually, I'll do this one in the microwave. I'll just give it a few seconds, and then I'm going to stir. Okay. And then so I showed you the circle. As I said, you don't have to do this. I mean, it's always a good idea to have a tray or something, because you'll want to be able to transfer these to the fridge to carry on setting. Just obviously, if they're like my children, they will want to have one instantly. So put it in the fridge to let it kind of cool down quicker. And I find with chocolate as well, it sets better if you cool it down really quickly. So sometimes I even put it in the freezer. And sometimes that does require taking out whatever's in the freezer and kind of setting it next to the freezer and just putting the chocolate in for 5 minutes, letting it set, and then taking it out. But I find it is much, you don't get the kind of chalky dustiness on it if you let it cool really quickly. And these snaps as well, you can actually store in the freezer and you can eat them from frozen. Which is actually quite nice. Quite nice to have them coming fresh and cool out of the freezer. All right. So that one is done. And with chocolate as well, sometimes we want to wait. You're thinking, oh, I've got to get every piece melted. But sometimes it's best just to take it off before everything is melted and then just stir it. Yeah, because the residual heat will melt the rest, because you don't want to burn it. Okay. So I'm going to put my white now on. Right, so it's sometimes best to just use the residual heat in the bowl to finish off any small bits. Okay, and just stirring it around will help to finish that off. Okay, and so what I've got here is some orange and a bit of nutmeg. So I'm going to put that in my dark chocolate. And I'm not going to put it in my white chocolate because my white chocolate has some vanilla-y flakes in it, so it looks quite nice as it is. And also what I do is I add, and the reason I add a bit of coconut oil, so I'm going to put, if you're using 200 grams of chocolate, you're going to use a teaspoon of coconut oil. But obviously I've got just under 100 of this bar, so I'm just going to use a tiny bit of coconut oil. What the coconut oil does, it adds a bit of shine. So as I said, chocolate, sometimes when you heat it and you cool it, it can go a bit dull. But the coconut oil just keeps the shininess to it. And also helps it to set. Because, you know, with coconut oil, it's solid at cold temperature, and then it's liquid when you melt it. So when it sets, it'll help it to set firm. And it'll also just helps to keep the shine. So that's why I add just a little bit of coconut oil. Okay, so into my chocolate, I'm going to zest some orange. So zest to how much ever you like. So if you want a real, you know, some people really love the chocolate orange combination. Some people not so keen on it. So, you know, and also depending on the size of your orange. I've got a fairly big orange here. So I'm just going to do about half of my orange. Okay, orange zest in. All right, and then I'm going to add my nutmeg. So I've got some whole nutmeg here. Now with nutmeg, because it is such a strong, powerful flavor, you always want to go with less. So I always err on the side of less. So a few good gratings, especially if it is fresh like this, you don't need a whole lot. So maybe about 4 or 5 gratings. Okay. All right. And then stirring that in. Okay. And now, all right, I'm going to turn that off. And I just realized as well, my chocolate bars are 90 grams, so I might melt a wee bit more. So the recipe calls for 200 grams, so I'm a couple grams short. So I'm just going to melt it up a bit more. Okay. Now, while that melts, what I'm going to do is get my toppings ready. So for the snaps, you can use whatever you've got in. So I've got some pistachios. I mean, these are left over from some other work that I was doing. There's pistachios in green, pistachios, always think of the shelled ones if you're using pistachios, not the ones in shells. So you want just a few handfuls, and you're going to just roughly chop those. All right, I'm just going to pass my knife through them a bit. But you can use pumpkin seeds, you can use sesame seeds. Obviously, if you're making a biscuit as well, you'll probably have bought some sesame seeds in. So chocolate and sesame, a really great combination. So you can use sesame seeds. You can use flaked almonds. You can chop your own almonds. It's up to you. Whatever you want to use, whatever you've got in. And then in terms of dried fruit, you can use, I've got some cranberries. Again, those are quite festive, and we're seeing more of those this time of the year. But if you've got raisins, that's fine. Sultanas, currants, whatever you got. Okay. Passing my knife through because I want these kind of roughly chopped so that I can sprinkle them and they don't kind of take over the whole snap. And I'm also going to add a pinch of sea salt to mine as well, because I really like the combination of sea salt with chocolate. I know some people think, oh, that's a bit weird, but try it. I think you'll like it once you try it. So just a bit of flaky sea salt. And again, that's just something from the pantry that I've got knocking about. Okay. I'm going to put some coconut oil into my white. All right. So whoever's cooking along with me, if you want to watch me make the snacks first, you can, or if you feel like you've got the handle on it, just go ahead and steam ahead. Essentially, what we're trying to do is just to get it into the circles on the baking tray. So as I said, if you're working with children and you want to kind of have a bit more kind of precision and control in the process, you can make the circles in advance. You can put the chocolate in a measuring jug and pour it, or you can let them spoon it. Depends on what you're like in the kitchen. I do prefer a bit of precision as much as I can, as much as my children will allow me to have. But again, it's up to you. It depends on what you want and how, you know, if you want it to be authentically handmade by them because it's going to their friends or their teachers or their grandparents, then yeah, let them have control of it. Okay. So, all right, this is hot. I'm just gonna pop a tea towel under it because it's quite hot. So I'm going to just go for spooning. We're just going to go with spooning. All right. Okay, so I've got some dark chocolate. I've got my circles. So I'm just going to spoon it into a circle. Okay. And then I'm going to come back and add a bit of white as well. So I'm going into the center of the circle with my dark. And maybe, okay. And again, depending on the size of your circle, you'll probably get about maybe 20, 30 out of this. Again, you don't want them to be too thick. So you just want to do a good spoonful and then kind of spread it out a bit because you don't want it to be too thick. The thinner, obviously, the further you can get them to stretch, but also they give you that nice snap if they're thinner. Okay, so just probably like one sort of spoonful. And I was doing this on baking paper. I think I said that, but just reminding you of that because they won't stick then. Okay. All right, so I'm kind of covering most of my circle with the dark, and then I'm going to come back with the white and add a bit more, and then I'm going to swirl those together. And the key to swirling is just to kind of layer a bit over, and then use, if you've got a cocktail stick or a knife, just using the points of that to kind of help you swirl it through. Okay. And it helps if you've got like a wide flat tray, or you could do this on a plate and just do them in smaller batches. And as I said, all you need to do is if your chocolate starts to harden, is just pop it back over the pan of boiled water, or boil the kettle and put some boiled water in another bowl and then sit it in there and it will loosen up again. Okay. And when you're gifting these, so I've got a little recycled box. So I'm always, I'm probably like turning into some crazy hoarder lady. But whenever I see like a little, if I get something in a little box or a little packet that looks quite interesting, I think, oh, actually, I might keep that because I might be able to use it. So I bought some hooks for the understairs storage, just some hooks to screw into the wall. And it came in a really cute little box. And I thought, actually, I'll keep that. So I'm going to line that little box with just some tissue paper, again, recycled from another present. But you can use just baking paper. And I'm just going to, yeah, use that as my gift box. But I've also bought, and I've been using these for years now, some little plastic bags, or you could even use the sandwich bags without the closures, you know, the ones that kind of are open that no one really tends to buy because they're a bit annoying because they don't stay closed. You can use those and then just tie a bow around them, and that will make a nice little gift bag as well. All right, so now I'm going to go in with a bit of white. Just gonna drizzle that on. Actually, it works really nice just to kind of drizzle it over. Okay. And you could even do all white if you wanted, a few all white. And yeah, it's up to you. Or just go for a more bolder splodge and then kind of mix them together. And then some with a drizzle, some with a bolder splodge. And then I'm going to get my knife out and do a little swirl. Okay. And I often find these sorts of things look really impressive, but they actually don't take much skill. And I like those kinds of presents, those kinds of recipes, things that look much more difficult to make than they actually are. Yeah, people will think, oh my gosh, you're a master chocolatier, and you're like, I am actually. But you know it only took you a few minutes to make. All right, so I've got a knife here. So I don't know, I can't really hold these up so you can see. I'll try and hold them down if you can see that. So what I'm just going to do now is just take a knife and kind of swirl them. Okay, maybe just make a little swirl. Okay. Okay. Kind of do some figures of 8 or just kind of whatever swirl pattern takes your fancy. Be quite bold with it, quite. You can always start small first and then go back and think, actually, I'd like some more swirl in that. All right, so now that the chocolate is down, I'm just going to go back and add a few bits of pistachios. Okay, and again, it helps if the pieces aren't too big. And there's no real rule on how much to add, as much as you like, as much as you've got, or as little as you've got. Okay. And again, if the kids are in control, it'll probably be a more is more sort of philosophy. Okay. All right. So I've got my pistachios on. And obviously I've only done one tray here, but you can probably get out another tray. So I've got 3, 6, 9, 12. I could probably get another 10 or 12 out of my next lot. Okay, but I'm only going to do one tray for now. But if you're at home doing this, do carry on. And as I said, if you want to set it aside and come back to it, you can. Okay, so I'm just going to then add a few cranberries. Okay, maybe a couple. All right, and one of mine is spread considerably, but that's okay. It's less round than I would like it, or oblong. All right. Okay, so now then I'm just going to sprinkle a bit of sea salt on a couple. Obviously, if you're thinking about, you know, children, they may not be so keen on this sea salt combination, but trust me, it's delicious. But again, you don't have to do that. All right, I'm going to bring these over so you can see them, and then I'm going to pop them in. You can pop them in the fridge or pop them in the freezer. I'm going to pop them in the freezer for the class. Can you see those? There we go. All right, so I'm going to pop them in the freezer, and I'm going to get my biscuits out while I'm down here. All right, nice and firm. Probably too firm, because I said I was going to set a timer, didn't I? But did I? No, I forgot. I got distracted and forgot to set the timer. So they're a bit too firm. They will stop. Popping these in my freezer, so pardon my disappearance. But while I'm getting this in the freezer, does anyone have any questions about that? Any other ideas? Do you need any other ideas of what you might want to put on them? Or yeah, what other kinds of, don't know. Fire away. You've got any questions? All right, so I'm just sliding these into the freezer on a tray. And again, if you need to do these in batches, because if you've only got one tray, you can do them in batches. As I said, your chocolate might get, it might just need to be melted with a bit of warm water underneath it, if that's okay. Okay, so I chopped a few too many pistachios. So you only really need a small handful of whatever you're using to decorate them. You don't need much. So again, it might be a good idea to purpose. So if you've got, if you're making something else, like the biscuits and using sesame seeds, you might want to just use sesame seeds because you'll have plenty left over for that.
Hi, Nina. We have a
question
from Melissa.
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, Melissa.
Chopsticks and make chocolate lollipops with this method.
Yeah, you'd probably want to make them thicker if you're using lolly sticks. And what I would do is I would do that in 2 layers. So what I would do is I'd make a circle, quite a thick one, put the lolly stick in, let it push it down in, and then let it kind of slightly cool a bit. So it goes a bit firm, so the stick stays firm. And then I would go back over it with another layer of chocolate because you'd want to reinforce it. Because obviously when you pick it up, it being on that stick and wanting to keep it firmly on the stick rather than just kind of flopping off, you need to have a bit more weight in the chocolate. So I would do it in 2 layers. So I'd make a circle, quite a good size one, pop a lolly stick in, let it cool a bit so it goes a bit firmer, and then come back with another layer of chocolate over the top. And then I would decorate that layer. Yeah, and obviously you'll need more chocolate as well. So you probably want to maybe double the quantity of chocolate you're using to then get you enough lolly sticks. But yeah, you totally could. Very good question. Actually, I saw someone doing that the other day and I was like, oh, that's quite fun. But I always find it a bit tricky to find the lolly sticks. You either find them in, obviously on Amazon, which I try to minimize my Amazon purchasing, and you end up with like hundreds, or you get like the crafting ones, which are all sorts of crazy colors. So if you have a good line and where you can find those lolly sticks, let me know, because I never managed to get it right in terms of being able to find either just a human amount or the non sort of brightly colored ones. But really good question. Really good question. All right. So I'm just going to tidy this stuff away. Okay. And get ready for my biscuits. So now I'm going to get my oven on. So you want to get your oven on to 180. Okay, so that's kind of the general baking temperature. Always when you're baking, and I'm glad I remembered to do this, make sure your oven racks are in the right position. I've got this very annoying sort of door oven rack, which I really don't get the point of, but it came with the oven. So always check your oven racks in the right place before you kind of leave it to heat up, because obviously it's easier to move the racks around when it's cold than when it's hot. And I'm saying that very much as a reminder to me, because I also always forget to do that and then end up having to take hot trays out. Whoops, my shoddy decorations here. I'm hanging my bubble back on. There we go. All right, so I'm just going to give my area a little wipe down. I've got some pistachio crumbs everywhere and sesame seeds. Okay. Now for the biscuits, we're also going to need some baking paper and a baking tray. So again, you can do these in batches if you've only got one tray. And you can also, to save you on baking paper, you can also use the baking paper that the logs were wrapped in. So you don't have to get fresh baking paper to line your tray. And I often do this because I get through a lot of baking paper and think, well, why can't I just reuse that? So I often reuse paper that I've wrapped things in. And yeah, just to cut down on waste. Right, so I'm going to get 2 pans out. I've got double the amount, but you probably will be able to get these all in one pan. You don't want to put them too close. They don't need too much space in between. All right. So it helps to have a sharp knife. I'm going to give my knife a quick wash because it's got statues on it. Okay. Okay. Just out of the way. All right. Okay. All right, here's one log. As I said, they're a wee bit firm. All right, so sometimes because the ends can be a bit sort of knobbly, sometimes I cut off the end and I keep those for me. But so yeah, so then you want to just slice through the log, probably about between 1/2 centimeter and just over 1/2 centimeter thick, rounds. Okay. Okay, and try to apply even pressure to kind of get through the whole log in one cut. So that way you're not kind of stop starting. So just kind of, and this helps obviously if they're nice and firm, you can apply that quite firm pressure. Okay, looks a bit like a sausage. Great. Okay. Okay. All right, so that's one slice. Now, I'm going to take the other out. So not all of my seeds stuck, but that's fine because I can just sprinkle them on if I want. Or you can even reuse these as well if you want for another dish. Just pop them back in the jar. All right, so I'm going to use this paper that my log was rolled in. I'm just going to open it back up and put it down. Okay, and pop them on the board. So sometimes the bottom edges can go a bit untidy. So what I will just do is just kind of round the edges together. Just kind of square off any uneven edges. Okay, just pop them on the board, on the tray, rather. Okay. I'm going to save these little ends, pop them in the corner, and those will be my my cook's privileges, as we call it. Okay, so some nice even pressure going all the way down, trying to get through in one cut. And obviously these are the types of things as well, you know, if you get the Christmas music on and you need a bit of Saturday activity, you can kind of bake up, you know, get a little assembly line going with or without the kids, depending on how old they are, and just bake up a few batches of these. And you know, and then you have your kind of Christmas presents sorted. All right, or your Christmas Eve munching. I made a batch of these, a couple of test batches, and yeah, we even had them with lunch, so they went really well with soup. Had them just standing in the kitchen late at night on my own, you know, before I go to bed, having a nibble. But no, they're really delicious, really savoury, and quite enjoyable. All right, so I'm just going to put a few extra sesame seeds on that guy. All right, so that's one tray. So making sure you have a little bit of space in between, but not a huge amount, because they're not going to spread hugely. All right. Okay. Okay. So I'll just do one for now, because obviously I did a double batch. So I will do my others later. Any questions about that? About those before they go into the oven? Anybody? If you've got any extra sesame seeds, if you want, you can sprinkle them over the top because those will bake in, or you can just leave it around the edge. It's up to you. It's up to you. I might sprinkle some over the top.
Yes, we have a question.
Yes.
Could you roll it out and use a cookie cutter?
Like stamp sort of cookie cutter. Trying to think. Yeah, you probably could. Yeah, you could. Yeah, so what you would do is at the stage where when you're forming it into sausages like this, what you want to do is just to form it into maybe 2 flattened discs, yeah? And then just roll it out and cookie cutter it. Yeah, I would make sure you put a bit of flour underneath, just a little light dusting of flour so that they don't stick and you can get them off. And then just using something like a table knife, butter knife sort of situation to just kind of scoop them up. Because obviously the more kind of rolling and heat from the surface, the softer they'll become. So you want to just kind of minimize the shaping. And I would also use a cookie cutter that probably wasn't too involved. Some of the things like trees and stuff, because you've got all those angles and things get stuck in and then they come out looking a bit misshapen. So a nice star, or maybe a nice star, or even a gingerbread. I mean, gingerbread might be a bit confusing. People might expect a sweet biscuit and get a savory cheese biscuit. So stars would be perfect. Yeah. So form it into 2 discs before you put it into rest, and then roll out 1 disc at a time. Because I think the key here is you want it to be cool and firm, but not too firm, obviously, because then it'll be difficult to kind of roll out and cut. But you don't want it to be too soft, because if it's too soft, it'll just melt into the table and then you won't be able to pick it up and handle it. But yeah, you totally could do that. Yeah, very good point. And again, that might be more fun for the kids as well if they can stamp them out. Yeah, totally. And you could even get, I don't know if you've got any of those, so rolling them out and cut them into circles with like biscuit or scone cutters. And then you can buy those little rubber stamps to go on top as well, which kind of adds a bit of fun too. Yeah, good question. All right, I'm going to see if my oven's not quite hot enough yet. So I probably will carry on cutting my other biscuits while my oven heats. But yeah, so I think, savory cheese biscuits are probably not on most people's Christmas baking list, but why not? You can obviously do sweet biscuits as well, but I think savory biscuits are nice. It's not, sometimes you get a bit sort of fed up of having loads of sweets around, and there's never a dearth of sweet treats at Christmas, whether it be chocolates or biscuits or whatever else. So yeah, doing something savory can be nice. All right, so I'm just gonna do these as well. Okay. Yeah. And again, so I'm going to package these once they're cooled into some little sandwich bag type things. You could put them in a jar if you wanted. Again, if you had a nice sort of long cylindrical jar, you could stack them up into a jar. That could be quite cute, actually. I'll see if I've got a jar in my cupboard of jars that it might work nicely in. So yeah, you could stack them into cylinders. You could, obviously, I've got a little box, as I said, that I'm going to put, oh no, that's the snacks. So I'm going to put these in a little bag, and I'll show you the little bag. But again, you could use these or a little sandwich bag type thing. Just depends on what you've got and what's easiest to access. All right, so for those of you who may have joined late, I've made a double batch of these biscuits. So that's why I'm going to have more than you if you're making them with us. So they're getting much easier to cut now because they've defrosted a bit. Okay. Okay, so soon as my oven's hot, yeah, it's hot now, I'm going to pop these in. So you want to put these, as I said, on a middle rack so that you're getting a nice even heat. Right, so the top will be too hot, the bottom will be, and I don't want to crowd that, so I'm going to take a few of these off. Okay. So making sure there's space between them all. I've got a bit overzealous here instead of crowding them. I'm going to take a few off. Okay. All right, I'm going to sprinkle some more seeds on. Don't want to waste those. Okay. Okay, so in the oven. And these are going to need about 15 minutes to bake. Again, I've said this before, and I know some of you who've been to my baking class before heard me say this. Whenever you're baking something, depending on your oven and how it heats, where the heat kind of how it distributes and where it kind of gets, most concentrated the heat. Always check your bake before the kind of full time. So never leave it the full 15 minutes and think, oh, it's done. So I'm going to put 10 minutes on my timer and then I'm going to check it to see how they're getting on. And then obviously if they need more time, I'll rotate them and I'll give them more time, because you can always bake more, but you can't bake less. And there's nothing worse. And I mean, even I still do this. Get distracted, think, oh, I'll give it some more time, and then forget it's in there, and then end up burning it. And it's so gutting when you put all the time and effort into making something and you burn it. So always give it less, check it, and then rotate it if you need. And rotating is because some ovens will heat unevenly, so some sides will be hotter than others. And you'll notice that in your bake if one half of the tray is browner and the other half is pale. So often I just spin it then and bake it some more. Okay, so I'm going to pop these ends out of the way because I'm going to bake those later. Okay, so now we're going to check on our honey to see how that is going. Okay, and see if, I don't know if anyone's made this along with me. You can smell it along with me. All right, so I'm going to take the foil, the cling film off, and it smells amazing. It smells really herbally, really delicious. Okay. All right, I'm just going to check the temperature with my finger. Yeah, it's a tiny bit warm, but definitely can still be jarred. Okay, so I'm just going to take out the herbs. All right, good idea to have a little bowl or something handy to put them in because they'll be nice and sticky. Okay, and fish out any little bits that may have broken off. And if you want, if you've got lots of bits, so say if you use something like peppercorns or something that's in bits that you want to then strain off, so you would just use something like a fine mesh sort of sieve. So you could pass it through something like that if you wanted to. So I might actually do that now. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to pass it through just to get out the little sort of sprigs that broke off, just so it'll go in nice and clear. Okay. Right. And obviously on the label as well as drawing a fetching picture, you might want to say what it is. So you might want to say herbal honey or rosemary and thyme honey or whatever you put in, just so people know what they're getting. It's always nice to know what people are feeding you. So yeah, all right. All right, now where are my jars? I put them over here. All right. Okay. I might actually trim the bottom of this a tiny bit more so that they fit in perfectly. There we go. All right, and so then I'm just going to pour this. It's going to be a wee bit warm, but that's okay. I'm just going to pour it in over my herbs. Okay, and obviously your herbs might start to float. They'll float until they kind of start to get weighed down by the honey. All right, and I'm just pouring this in. There we go. All right, and you probably want to fill it just under the lip, so just where you kind of close the jar. Okay. Whoops, a bit too full. And then if you want, obviously it's still a bit warm, so you probably want to leave the lid off and let it kind of cool before you seal it. I'm just going to pop the lid on so you can see what it looks like. All right, so, and I mean, I went quite minimal on the inside bits, but you could probably add a bit more if you wanted. But there you are, some herb infused honey. All right, and I've got a little bit extra there, and I might keep for my toast. Let's see. All right, and then that goes really well. Again, I know I'm talking about cheese quite a lot, but if you are a cheese person, those kind of slightly more savory honeys, they go, you know, they'll go with your breakfast or whatever else. But they add a nice drizzle on top of savory things as well, like cheese or a meat or whatever else. Okay. All right. So now, while the biscuits are still baking, I'm going to check on the snaps and show you my little box that I'm going to package them in. And I've got sesame seeds everywhere, so I'm just gonna clear up these. Okay, pop them back in there. Okay, that out of the way. All right, honey, go there. All right, so I'm gonna nip into the freezer. Excuse me, skirting around on my kit and check on my snaps. All right, ta-da! There they are. So you see, you can just lift them up, and you've got nice round snaps. Like that. So you can either, if you're not going to gift these, what I would do is I wouldn't package them until you're ready to gift them, obviously, because you know you don't want them to melt or whatever else. So so pretend I'm ready to gift these now. So you can store these in the fridge in like an airtight container. As I said, you can even keep them in the freezer if you've got more space in the freezer, because they can be eaten from frozen. All right. So I brought this little box here because it came from some hooks. So I'm going to use that. I'm going to take off this bit of tape up front. Okay. Again, if you wanted to wrap the box, you could, but I'm just going to put some butter ribbon on it and just be done. And simple. You could even use a bit of your spare herb if you want. So then I've got some spare tissue here that I got in another gift. So I'm just going to take a bit of that. Okay. And then I've had some scissors. I've got some scissors here. And so I'm just going to cut that so that it kind of is a bit small enough to fit in the box and overlap a bit, but not too much, because it is a small box. And again, so if you've got anyone in your life that might have, obviously it's a good idea to tell people what's in it. So you can obviously put a tag on it and label, you know, what ingredients you've got in there. And obviously if it's got nuts in it, always a good idea to label it contains nuts, just in case someone shares it with someone who does eat nuts and the nuts aren't obvious. So I've kind of folded this in a few layers, and I'm just going to set it inside my little box and making sure there's a bit of an edge to kind of fold over the top. So it's like, oh, what's underneath? All right. So I'm just going to pop a few in here. So depending on how much you like them, you might decide to give them more or less. But in this little box, I can probably get about 5 or 6. All right. So I got more than that in. I got 1, 2, 3. No, I got 7 in. And if you want to go for an even 10, you can do. As long as it still closes. Okay. All right, I'm just gonna fold that over, and then my little box closes up front. And again, I'm gonna use, got some star garland. Again, this is just bits of stuff that have come off other things or been knocking around. Maybe I'll use a bit of white and gold ribbon. All right, so I'm going to cut off a good length of that. You can even use the kind of, the kind of curly ribbon, that works too. All right, so obviously if I used to have designs on being a gift wrap girl when I was at a department store when I was little. So I quite like and quite get into present wrapping. Okay. Whoops, that's my biscuits. They've had their 10 minutes. So I'm just going to pull that through, and then I'm going to check on those guys. Okay. All right. Okay, they're looking great. So I know my oven, and my oven cooks more on one side, so I'm just going to rotate them. Okay. All right. And they're going nice and brown, but they're going to need more time. So that was 10 minutes. So I'm going to give them 5 more minutes and see how we go. All right. So, and because I've got some spare rosemary, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to tuck a little bit of rosemary underneath when I'm finished with my bow. So I'm going to tie a tight bow on here. Okay, and then just tuck a sprig of rosemary underneath. Oops, underneath both layers. Okay, and then I'm going to cut that. All right, and there we go. A little box of chocolate snaps. And if you didn't see them before, here they are. Yeah. So some of mine went a bit misshapen when I was showing you, when I was tipping the tray towards you. But again, that doesn't matter. It's all about how they taste. And I'm sure they taste delicious. All right. So while I'm going to start with the biscuits, any questions? Any other ideas you want? So another idea is another sort of good, inexpensive idea is candied oranges. So what I do is I find they slice oranges in rounds, and you can paint them with a bit of honey, a bit of maple syrup to give them a glaze, and then just really cook them in the oven for maybe about 120 for about 2 hours until they dry out nicely, and you can flip them over because you want to dry them out. You don't want to roast them basically. So maybe about 120 for about an hour, flip them over and give them another hour. And so you'll have dried sort of orange candy, and you can also dip that in a bit of chocolate as well. That looks quite nice. But again, if you want to do something fresh, so something I do often for the kids, we had a festive movie this weekend, and I'm just going to peel some clementine segments and dip those in a bit of chocolate. And then those can be a nice sort of gift if you're giving it to maybe a child or a friend from playgroup. Another really nice gift, if you want to splurge just a little bit more, is something like marinated cheese. So you can either buy a block of feta, or you can use something that's, well, you can use yogurt and strain it to make something called labneh. So you buy, full fat yogurt, strain it in like a tea towel. So you get the sort of solid, the soft, creamy cheese stuff, and the liquid, the way it comes off. And then you can scoop that into bowls and then roll that, and you can roll that into, herbs or whatever else, and then cover them in olive oil. And then you've got these nice little herby sort of marinated cheese bowls. For the feta, if you want to put it in a jar, cover with olive oil, you can add herbs, you can add peppercorns, you can add garlic cloves, lemon zest. Another nice, easy, edible gift. But any other questions about other things that you might like to make? We've got just a few more minutes till our biscuits are.
No questions so far.
No questions.
I just want to say I can't believe you've done it in an hour and a half.
Yeah. But this is the thing. These things, it doesn't have to be. I often think people think, these things have to be complicated, but they can be really simple things. And just adding a bit of, color, a bit of ribbon, or just a bit of, something fresh and herby, just makes it look more special and more time consuming. than it
Definitely.
actually is. And sometimes it's all about the packaging. I know we're often suckers for a good package, aren't we? So just making it look nice on the outside is really all you need. Right, I'm just checking on these guys. A few more minutes. But yeah, so now you can think about what else you can create. I'll try and think of some. Obviously, I do lots of fermenting, so I do lots of Christmas sauerkrauts. I'm actually making my own mustard right now, which is actually really easy. So you just need to buy the yellow mustard seeds, give those a good grind. Add in, I'm doing a honey mustard, so I've added in some honey, some raw apple cider vinegar, because that's what's going to do the fermenting for me. A bit of salt, a bit of mustard powder, and put it in a jar and let it sit for a few weeks, and then you've got your own homemade mustard. Again, you could flavor that with garlic or miso or again, whatever you want to add in, whatever kind of mustard you're after. And again, you can then package that up into little jars to gift to people too. But I think I saw a question pop up.
Yasko, is there an alternative to chocolate snaps so it's not chocolate based and has less sugar?
I'm trying to think. To get that sort of style and shape, probably not, because you need the kind of the solid shape. You could do carob powder. So I don't know if you know carob. So carob is kind of like, I mean, it's a caffeine-free version or powder, so it's a bit like chocolate. So you could make it yourself using coconut oil and maybe like a carob powder, or what other kind of flavoring. If you have like maybe a vanilla protein powder or something, with adding some coconut oil to that, you could get a nice consistency. But unfortunately, you wouldn't get the same kind of snap. So I found that even when I make them with like raw cocoa powder and coconut oil, I have to keep them in the freezer if I want to get that snap, which is in itself a bit pleasing. Otherwise, it'll still stay firm because of the coconut oil, but it won't have the same kind of breakable quality. And that's obviously due to like the milk fats and those oils. But you probably, I don't know, I'll have a think. Like, you've got my email address. If you don't, it's Nena Foster, NENAFOSTR food at gmail.com. Send me a message and I'll have a think about what else you could do. But having coconut oil and some form of powder would get you somewhere towards that. Because obviously the coconut oil will add the fat, and it'll have like the staying power to keep it solid. But you won't get the same kind of break. But in terms of other things that aren't chocolate related, you could do shortbread. Have a bit of sugar in, but you could do. I do have. If you go to, so I do recipes for a company called Little Cooks Company, which is a healthy kind of children's baking box. And I also do recipes for their website. So if you go to Little Cooks Co, LITTLECOOKS co.co.uk, have a look at their recipes. And there are a few Christmas recipes that I've developed there, some with chocolate, some without. So there's some truffles, but they're made with dates, some date truffles. There's also some pecan snowball biscuits. So they're like coconut and pecans milled up to make a snowball biscuit, so slightly crumbly biscuit. So those would work. But gingerbread, and if you want a good gingerbread recipe, I developed a gingerbread recipe a few years ago for Rude Health. So if you go to the Rude Health website, and there's a spelt sort of gingerbread person recipe there, you can try that. And it goes with a date caramel dipping sauce. And that dipping sauce actually makes a really nice gift as well. So you can it's made with dates and plant milk. And I think just a bit of, what else goes in there? Maybe a bit of butter. I can't remember exactly, but have a look on the Rude Health website for the gingerbread, spelt gingerbread people biscuits. And there's a caramel sauce that's made with dates. And that actually is a really nice kind of edible gift as well that you can give for pouring over ice cream or dipping things in as well. But I'll have a think of what other things that are non-chocolatey. Yeah, but that's a really good point. But yes, I know this time of year it's like chocolate city, isn't it? It's chocolate madness. So my biscuits are still a bit hot, but I'm going to use a knife just to lift one up so you can see what it looks like. Okay, so here we are. So there are your cheese shortbread. They've got a nice little coating of sesame seeds around. So you just want to let those cool before you package them. And I'll show you what I've got here. So I've got these little cellophane bags that you can use just a sandwich bag if you wanted. Or again, if you've got a jar, you can pop them in a little jar, kind of stack them up. So I've got this. So I don't want to handle them too much, but you can imagine popping some, oops, I sealed it. Popping a few in the bag and then just tying it with a ribbon. And that's the sort of thing you might like to do with that. So I'll leave these to cool for a little bit before I do that. But let me see what time are we at? Oh, we're just bang on 11:30. Yeah, so that's that. So yeah, so if you want any other ideas, as I said, these are here. I think Marta has the recipes, so she can send the recipes over to you. And I think you're right, you probably already have the recipes. So have a go. If you want some other ideas, as I said, go have a look on my Rude Health. So my headphones are about to die, so I'm gonna take this off. So have a look on either the Little Cooks Company website, because I've got a few recipes there, but also on Rude Health, because I've done some recipes for them in the past, festive recipes. But if you have other ideas, just give me drop me an email, and I can shoot some other ideas over to you. And if you want some more ideas for fermented gifts, let me know as well. And actually, if you're on Instagram, you can follow me on Instagram. It's Nena, Nena.Foster.food. And I actually have a few posts on there. So I did some work with Aldi, doing some affordable Christmas gifts as well. So I've got a few recipes on there. One's for fermented sauerkraut. One is for some biscotti. Again, they've got chocolate in, but you can take the chocolate out and add in some more dried fruit instead. But they're a wholemeal biscotti with some ginger and some hazelnuts, I think. And then there's also a recipe for a spiced seed and nut mix. And again, that's a really good one. It's got a bit of chili in, but you can take the chili out if you want to serve it to children as well. So it's just getting a whole load of nuts and seeds, and going to places like Aldi, for example, you can get sort of nuts and seeds really inexpensively there compared to kind of some of the high street shops. Or if you go buy them in bulk from one of the cash and carry type places, and it's just roasting nuts with things like a bit of cumin, a bit of paprika, a bit of honey, a bit of sea salt, until they kind of get in, and coating them and then roasting them in the oven and letting them cool. And then you can pop those in jars, and they make really lovely kind of, gifts and snacks. So yeah, so that recipe is also on my Instagram grid. So have a look there if you want some other ideas. But otherwise, that's it. That's me. I'm going to pop a few of these biscuits. I know they're hot in here just for effect. So you can see the finished look. Okay, so guys, again, depending on how much you like them, you might decide how many they get. All right, so I put four in. All right, and I'm going to take a bit of, I'm going to use this nice star garland that I've got. Just going to lasso that around. So that's now steaming up because it's hot. But there you go. Biscuits, honey, and chocolate snaps. All right, so thank you all for joining, and I hope you guys have a really lovely festive period. Enjoy some time off, enjoy kind of just taking things a bit slow, because I know this year for so many people has been absolutely intense, and we all just kind of need a break from everything going on in the outside world. So hopefully get a break, get some nice quality time together, do some cooking together, just try and enjoy some of the time that you've got at home, and yes, get some nice food in, and just enjoy yourself. So thank you all for watching and for making it along with me. So yeah, happy Christmas, and I hope to see you guys in the new year. All right, bye.
Bye.